Deborah Lipstadt is a professor of Holocaust studies at Emory University. She's fought Holocaust deniers in court. Rachel Weisz has played her in a film, and she's the author of many books, including Anti-Semitism Here and Now, and she joins us now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today on France 24.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, today's event in Jerusalem was deeply moving. It was also very political, from talk of Iran to that spat between Russia and Poland. Do you think this politicisation desecrates the memory of the Holocaust, or is it just inevitable when you're talking about history?
To a certain degree, it's inevitable, but I find it deeply disturbing that in relation to this genocide, this massive, massive genocide, there have been other genocides, but this was a state-sponsored genocide resulting in the destruction and the murder of 1 out of every 3 Jews on the face of the earth, that it should have become so politicized. Vladimir Putin's charge that it was Poland that started the war is ludicrous. Poland's attempt to rewrite its history and say, well, there was no Polish state, to say that there are no Poles who collaborated is ludicrous. Hungary's attempt to say, you know, we were the oppressors when it was Hungarians who oversaw in great measure the destruction of the Hungarian Jewish community, mention of Iran, all those kind of things. That shouldn't be the focus. The focus today should have been on the victims, the survivors, and raising the question, how did something like this happen on the European continent, which considered itself enlightened and educated, and it run by a country which was the epitome of intellectual achievements? I don't know if France would accept that so much, but certainly along with France, one of the leaders in terms of educational and intellectual achievements. How was this possible? That's what the discussion should be.
Absolutely. Okay. And this, huge show of international support in Jerusalem today does jar, doesn't it, with what is happening around the world today? An alarming rise in anti-Semitism from Paris to Brooklyn to Berlin to Belgium. The list goes on. What use are these kinds of events if Jews still have to hide their identity and their faith?
Well, I think they're a sign of, in that way, I think they are important. They're a reminder that to Jews, and certainly to non-Jews, that Jews aren't going underground because of these attacks, that they're not hiding their identity. I myself, who never did this in my life, have begun to wear a Jewish star. I don't know if you can see it, just as a sign that you can't frighten me. It's not the sum total of my Jewish identity. It's not my expression of my Jewish identity. But I think it's there was a partisan song that was sung in the ghettos during the war by the resistance fighters, and the refrain was "Mir seinen da." It was in Yiddish. We are here. And I think to some degree that these gatherings are important, and it's important when leaders take this strong stand. Having said that, that won't solve the problem. The problem today is primarily not coming from state-sponsored anti-Semitism. It's coming from outside. It's coming from people who are walking down the street, whether it's Brooklyn, whether it's Berlin, whether it's Paris, whether it's Marseille, whether it's Halle, hitting a Jew, knocking a Jew, or in extreme cases, as in Halle and Pittsburgh and San Diego and others, picking up a weapon and trying to kill a Jew. So while these gatherings are important, they're not going to solve the problem, though they should be held. I'm not sure that we needed a gathering in Jerusalem and then one in Auschwitz, which has been going on for many years. In Jerusalem, every year, right after Passover, April, May, there's Yom HaShoah, which is the Israeli gathering. It's linked to the date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I would have liked to see the focus here now on Auschwitz, then in Jerusalem in April.
Okay. Today we heard the French President, Emmanuel Macron, talking about the problem here, touched on some of the things you just mentioned. In France, anti-Semitic acts have risen by 70% in each of the last 2 years, a huge rise, including the murder of 2 elderly Holocaust survivors, 2 women. France, though, has some of the strongest laws against anti-Semitism in the world. How do you explain that?
Well, I think laws can only take you so far. There are people who are willing to ignore the law, to do whatever they want in spite of the law. I think these laws are important because if you don't have the force of the state and the authorities saying this is wrong and we will punish you, we will adjudicate this. But again, goes back to what I was saying earlier. Gatherings like this are important. Laws are significant, but those alone won't do it. It calls for people saying we have to become the unwelcome guest at the dinner party. If someone at the dinner party or around the water cooler in your office or over coffee at the cafe makes some sort of anti-Semitic crack, make some sort of anti-Semitic remark, we have to call the person out. You may not change their mind, but you have to telegraph a message to the other people around the table that this is unacceptable. So I think that is extremely important. That piece is missing. And I think the other piece that is very painful and very difficult is that I know that certain countries they're called new arrivals, certain countries refugees, whatever term you want to use, that some of them come, we've seen this in Germany quite a bit, and of course we've seen it in France, come with a antipathy to Jews that has been played out in very difficult ways.
And President Macron is also taking a lot of criticism here in France over a new law that equates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. He says that denying Israel's right to exist has become a haven for anti-Semites. Do you agree with that position?
I agree with that last statement. It has become a haven. Many people who know that anti-Semitism it's more acceptable than it used to be, but it's still not quite acceptable. Put onto Israel characteristics, the anti-Semitic stereotypical characteristics that are usually associated with anti-Semitism. But I think I want to make something very clear. Criticism of Israeli policies, however severe, is not anti-Semitism, and no thoughtful person, I think, would say that. People criticize in France. They criticize whenever I'm there. You hear criticism of French policies. I'm talking to people from Washington D.C. Criticism of American policies. That does not ipso facto make the person anti whatever the country is. But it's when. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have so much time, but I just wanted to ask you about the situation in the United States. I mean, there is a clear rise in anti-Semitism there as well, isn't there?
Absolutely.
From attacks on Jews marking Hanukkah recently to something you've written about, students on US campuses having to really hide their Jewish identity and any connection to the state of Israel.
Yes.
Yeah. You use the term Maranos, I think. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. The important thing I think to understand is that these attacks are coming from the right and from the left. Neither side is immune. We saw it in England in some of the leadership of the Labour Party. We've seen it on the right, Halle, San Diego, Pittsburgh, and the danger is when people weaponize and politicize the fight so that those on the right, on the political right, see it on the political left, and those on the political left see it on the political right, but don't see it right next to them. This is too important a fight to become a political weapon.
And just very briefly, are you hopeful for the future? Do you think anti-Semitism can ever be truly defeated?
I'm not sure it can ever be eradicated, but even though I've spent 40 years studying the Holocaust, writing about anti-Semitism, being sued for libel by a Holocaust denier, I remain optimistic because there is no logical reason, if you look at terms of history, for Jews to be around. They should have disappeared a long time ago. They're around. We're here. We thrive. There's a lot good going on as well as the bad. That's a reason for optimism.